With all the scientific and technological breakthroughs today and some even claiming that certain AIs are sentient, one may wonder why things like beliefs in the supernatural and especially religions still exist. The argument is that if humanity now is so overly enlightened through science, then there shouldn't be people believing things that don't adhere to scientific knowledge. Now, one may just simply choose to shrug off supernatural beliefs like the religious ones by saying that there are also certain people believing the Earth is flat, others that there are aliens at Area 51, and a third group that is convinced that Mark Zuckerberg is a lizard. Therefore one may think that religions are the same kind of nonsense. But why then are billions of people believing in and devoting at least part of their lives to these kinds of things? And this isn't anything new either. It's such an ancient practice that it predates recorded history. With that being the case and what we know from evolution, we know that all behaviors and traits of different animals, including those of humans, no matter how dumb, foolish or straight-out retarded they may be or seem, must serve or have served some kind of purpose. Otherwise they wouldn't be there in the first place, and that includes religions as well. While the current types of religions of today and how they're practiced differs a lot from that of ancient times, they follow the patterns and fundamental principles of those of and from those ancient times. A common misconception today is that knowledge or beliefs is something people simply consciously choose using their rational mind, but quite the contrary is it so that even beliefs and ideas go through a process of evolution. The more superior ideas are those that remain due to the people having them thriving, while the inferior ones or those that lead people to destroy themselves or go extinct disappear with the people having them through natural selection. That's how knowledge from ancient times came to be. For example, the reason why the majority of people have thought that sexual acts should be done between people and beings of the same species and of the opposite sex isn't so much about logic or preferences but about the fact that it's been necessary for as long as humans have been around, and it still is for those who don't have or use something like in vitro fertilization to produce offspring. Yet so many so-called progressive people today that support the free sexuality and LGBT+ community think that people being against things like homosexuality, for example, is just prejudice or sexual and gender norms that need to be broken, while it in actuality originates in biology and evolution. That's right, you non-binary sexuality supporting fellows thought evolution was your friend in this and that it was religion and God that was the problem. Wrong. So wrong. It's not Muhammad, Jesus, or some other religious figure that's your actual enemy. It's science and the laws of this world you're up against. It's because of evolution and natural selection that those that don't conform to what you call the sexual norms have been persecuted, tortured, hated, killed, etc. Still don't believe me? Let me explain further. If people historically generally were to be supportive, or should I say too supportive, of sexual behaviors outside of the so-called, quote, sexual norms, end quote, people could very well have gone extinct by now. This is because too few people would have practiced sexuality in a way that produced offspring. Even if this wasn't the case, just having people solely practice the sexual practices that would help them produce offspring would have made it easier for their people to survive. This is especially true as life expectancy was much lower back in those times. Again, this isn't something humans have chosen by themselves, for the most part anyway, but have been genetically hardwired to have. Yet some people today, for some reason, think they're so smart and good in modern times for suddenly coming up with the idea to support this stuff. The matter of fact is that it's not a new idea at all, otherwise there wouldn't have been religious laws that date back thousands of years against it. More importantly, it's actually still a problem. Let me ask you guys a question. Which countries and communities have problems with a too low birth rate? Just to name one of the issues it comes with. That's right. Those that promote all that doing what your body sexually craves without reservations and not thinking about the consequences, and which ones are able to maintain their numbers. That's right. Those that conform to the old sexual norms so many overly progressive people today look down on. As long as all that chaotic sexual stuff you guys promote is an evolutionary disadvantage and a problem, people will always be against it. And there's nothing you can do about it, unless you can solve every problem associated with it. The most fundamental one is that you would have to solve the birth rate issue. As humans can face a serious population collapse at this rate, you would have to first of all replace sexuality with reproductive technology so that you can ensure that enough people are made without humans reproducing naturally. Second of all, you would have to have a governing body of your society or community or whatever set up a public system where these children being born through reproductive technology are taken care of and raised properly, so you don't have to settle down and be responsible enough to raise children on your own. That could actually take care of the low birth rate issue, and the free sexuality and LGBT+ community wouldn't have to be blamed for causing that kind of problem. Just saying. But don't get happy too quickly, because there are more issues with everyone sleeping with who they feel like at any time, but that will come later in the video. This modern times way of life of being irresponsible and changing and manipulating society like a freaking amateur without knowing what you're doing is something humans do in too many damn areas these days. And not only that, but people won't even clean up the mess they cause either. It's to the point when rushed societal changes can create problems that could cause human extinction if they got too out of hand, like the one I mentioned previously. And it's exactly because humanity is too dumb to understand this that they have developed religions that have and enforce laws and rules against these kinds of changes in the first place. This doesn't just apply to atheists either, but even religious people are generally just as clueless. Seeing as the majority of humanity are too intellectually inept to understand this logic and have historically always been that way as well, is precisely why religions must have a mighty God forcing you to follow these kinds of rules in the first place. It's because most humans are just too retarded to do it otherwise. It's that simple, really. Anyway, the point with that example was that compared to modern knowledge which is born from understanding to the ancient knowledge which is one that has come forth not by its truth or the logic behind it, but by how it affects people and if it's an evolutionary advantage or not. Now, while it's true that there's also a place for scientifically accurate knowledge as well, it's not enough. The ancient knowledge that has stood the test of time, while a lot of it may even seem outright ridiculous to us today and the people themselves who had it might not even have understood it, it existed because it was beneficial to people and helped them thrive. Some of it is also outdated, but not all of it. And it's when modern people today remove that, kind of how they did in China for example, there are bad consequences that follow when humans dabble with things beyond their comprehension. Therefore, in order to accurately judge religions and their teachings, we can't merely judge it by our own common sense, morals, or even the wisdom of the modern age, but it must be judged based on the effect it has on people. Things like believing in a higher superior godlike being does not make sense to the present scientific community because it's not scientifically accurate. What atheists and probably theists too fail to realize is that it's not because it's accurate that people believe in it or did believe in it, but because it brings or brought benefits to humans. Oh, but you say, we should still make people just believe what's scientifically accurate, because making people believe in lies is horrible and morally wrong. Really? Does morals, or should I say, right and wrong, even exist without religion? Can you scientifically prove the existence of good and evil? No. Then how can social justice warriors possibly claim that something is wrong? After all, it's not scientific. If you can prove good and evil and right and wrong using science, please let me know in the comments which physics formula I should use to calculate the morality of certain actions, because I would be really interested in studying it. The closest thing I know that you can prove as morally wrong using science is when people do sexual things with people of the same sex or even with a person of the opposite sex, when you use the sexual organs for purposes they weren't shaped or evolved for. I mean that, if anything, it should scream out loud by itself that it's wrong as hell. Or even another thing such as lying in general, which, at least most of you, think is totally fine when it causes all kinds of issues, and even claiming and pretending that a man with a deep voice, and muscular body and in every way screams masculinity is a woman. How isn't that unscientific, huh? How isn't that just as bad or even many times worse? But since you guys reject such obvious things, don't come and condemn people who believe in old mythical tales because it helps them live more prosperous lives and claim that it's for moral reasons. And if it helps them stay away from other even more retarded things atheists do, like the things above, then they have a valid reason for sticking to them. Taking this point above further, doesn't that mean that when parents make their children believe in scary supernatural creatures or Santa, just to make them behave, it's wrong as well? There are people, religious and non-religious alike, who make their children believe in Santa Claus and say things like, "You won't get presents on Christmas if you don't behave." And among these are those, or at least the Santa group, that condemn the religious people. You know what that's called? Hypocrisy. You are hypocrites. But that's because it's Santa, he's harmless. Harmless. Harmless, you say. Really? Why don't you say that to the kids who have been kidnapped, murdered or sexually abused, due to following a stranger talking about Santa or even someone dressed as him? It's not harmless, and yet you people do the same thing. Why? Because it's convenient to make children behave, or because it makes children happy? My point is the same applies to religion. So why don't you people come back when you stop with Santa and all that other nonsense, or at least make sure to differentiate between science and the things you've made up? Anyway, all this isn't to say that we shouldn't do anything about religion. My point is that you people who don't like religion do stupid shit as well, which doesn't make logical sense. Well, according to your knowledge and understanding anyway. I'll just leave it at that. I hope you can at least now understand or start to think that there's probably something more to religions than them being just some dumb tales and old texts. Although they're far from accurate and contain a lot of nonsense and almost none of it makes scientific sense, there's a reason why we still have them. That even though it may appear that they're simply retarded, there are more to it than meets the eye. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if people have evolved to have their rationality compromised when it comes to religion and supernatural beliefs, just like when it comes to the thing people call love. Still, religions do cause a lot of issues, and our dependence on them causes a lot of problems. I would also assume that you watched this video to get some concrete, straight-on answers to why they're still around, as that was the title of the video. Now that I've made you understand that things aren't as simple as people accepting religion because they're merely intellectually inept, but that religion somehow brings benefits or are necessary and that's why they're still around. With all that said, let's start analyzing some basics of religion and lining up some of the major reasons why we still have them and what kind of actions one can take to make human society independent of them.